Okay, I'm re-recording the audio here for the Video Game History Museum. The original recording had some issues with it, so I just want to go over it again. What you're looking at now are some really rare things. That's an Atari kiosk on the right and Puppy Pong on the left. I do go through this fairly slowly so that you can see everything, and I'll give you guys commentary where I can on the stuff. But honestly, there are a couple things that I have no clue where they got them from or what they are. But I'll do my best. Um, okay, here we're looking at some clothing from over the years that you could get with video game stuff. This next section is some board games that were based on video games. I think I had that Zaxxon game at one time, but I have no idea whatever happened to it. But they weren't as much fun, these board games, as the video games were, obviously, so not a lot of people, got into them. Okay, we're coming around to the Odyssey. I never actually owned one of those, but if I remember right, it was a lot of like Pong-type games. That's the Odyssey 2. I had a chance to buy one of those pretty cheap at a flea market near here. Unfortunately, the guy would not budge on the price, and he was trying to get it, near eBay prices, was just insane. Note to people that are selling, condition and stuff does matter a lot, and the market too. So if if you've got something that somebody's going to take care of, and there's no chance of selling it to anybody else, in a decent time frame, you ought to consider maybe giving it to us guys, just because we're going to take care of it and hopefully do better with it. So that's my little piece there. This is actually a Telstar. We actually had one of these when I was little. The gun games were kind of cool. There was like a little target practice game, and I think you could shoot like a cowboy. But the driving game was kind of neat too. It was like Night Driver. Okay, we're walking over to the other side. These are some video game awards that Atari and some other people, or some other companies had got over the years. I don't know exactly what each one is for. I wish I would have said that in my original video, or my original audio, just so I could have said it again. But you can see there's tons of them. Looks like a lot of these are for actually from two software vendors, from Atari and from Sony, for games that they made and how much they sold. Okay, we're coming back over. That right there was an idea that they had before the Atari 2600. Was a cartridge-based Pong system. The next thing that we're going to be looking at here in a second is the Atari Cosmos, which is a three-dimensional holograph system. I've never seen one of these working, but supposedly it was a 3D image similar to what you'd see with like the holograph cards and stuff. And they did make a bunch of games, but I don't think many were sold. Couple 2600s. These right here are laptop 2600s. Very interesting. I don't know if these ever saw the light of day, but it was supposedly so you could sit it on your lap, with a friend and play. Okay, of course that's the 2600. That's a 6-switcher there. A couple newer 2600s there. That one is called the 2600 Junior. That was the last 2600 Atari made that I know of. As you can see, they've cut the process down significantly at that point. And but the problem was, by the time they released this, people had moved past the 2600 and had started going into the the 8-bit games like NES and stuff a lot more. Okay, so we're going to walk over to the other table here, and there's a lot of advertisements here. You can see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar playing Atari basketball, which I thought was kind of cool. They used to get a lot of celebrities that would actually, play these games, and then they'd do little ads for them and stuff. And people liked them, and I'm sure they got paid quite a bit of money to do them. So, yeah, you can see there. These are some magazines that have been written about video games over the years. Of course, the most famous is probably Nintendo Power, which is right down there. This was a McDonald's promotion from the 80s. Basically, they were little scratch-off cards that were modeled after the Atari video games. You would scratch off the little asteroids and you could win stuff. There was money and prizes. I think there was Atari stuff, too, that you could win there. I'm not positive, but I do remember like being able to win Atari games as a reward for getting a good card. Some of this is the original engineering logs and stuff like that from Atari. I think this one in particular is a memory mapping segment, although I can't be positive. Some more ads for some of the early games. There's one for Mega Mania, which was a favorite of mine. And Kaboom, another one. Okay, here you see a Compumate, which was a keyboard for the Atari 2600. The idea was to try to expand the Atari 2600 into a computer, but the consoles were never really powerful enough to do what you wanted to out of them. So these things kind of fell by the wayside. The few that are out there now are highly collectible just because, they didn't make a lot of these, and the ones they did make didn't sell all that well. So finding one like this is, pretty rare. You'll see, too, as we go through the rest of the museum, there's a lot of, these attempts to turn video games into computers. This is a ROM duplicator, or cartridge duplicator. Basically, you would stick a blank cartridge in one, and then you would stick a game in the other one, hit the button, and it would, duplicate the game for you. Okay, here you can see there's a couple of different kids controllers. They were kind of modeled after the Star Wars, or excuse me, the Star Raiders numbers pad. But the idea was to get kids more involved in educational gaming and stuff like that, and it just never really caught on. That Cookie Monster one, for example, is extremely rare. You really don't see it for anything else. Millipede poster there. I'm not sure what that big blue box is, but I'm guessing it's some type of testing equipment. This is the Atari 5200. Of course, a lot of people have seen these, but the thing that makes these bad was that controller right there. Between the side buttons and those number buttons, they just did not work right. Also, too, you had a problem with the buttons failing over time. So it's really hard to find good joysticks now. Basically, now you either have to get them redone or, luckily find one in a box. That's a trackball. It kind of had the same problem. This is an expansion port that let you play 2600 games on the 5200 since they weren't compatible. This is a 5100 system. I don't know much about that one. Again, there's another one of those number port / kid controllers that never really panned out. Here you're looking at the Atari 7800. This is a prototype, a clear system. Most of them come in black. I actually have one of these. You can put the 2600 controllers into it, thankfully, because those 7800 controllers are not good either. You can play the 2600 games on this as well as the 7800 games, and there's a lot of good games for both, actually. Unfortunately, in Atari's case, it came too late, and it just never panned out. Another keyboard, just like we saw with the 2600s. That cartridge right there, I believe, expands the capabilities of the 7800. I believe it gives it more RAM and some graphics power that it didn't have originally. That is a original computer space game made in the 70s. One of the first games, I believe. I've never actually played that game, but it's very neat to see there. These are the Atari 8-bits. I had a ton of these. I still have a ton of these, ranging from the Atari 400 up through the Atari 800 XL. You can see there it had 2 cartridge ports. There's some floppy drives and cassette recorders. Most people that I know, when they bought their Ataris, bought the disc drives. If you wanted to, you could use the cassette recorder, but the problem was it took absolutely forever to run games or to save them. So most people I know just didn't bother with them. They went with the disc drives instead. And although they were expensive, they were still a lot easier to use and just a lot better in general to deal with. Looks like there's an interface, an 850 interface module there. Some of the other peripherals. There is an Atari 1200 XLS. I never really saw one of these before, this show. But these are supposedly the big brother of the 800 XL and the 600 XL. As you'll see later, there's a 1450 XLD too, that has built-in disk drives, which was new at this stage. Very expensive. This is the 600 XL. This is sort of the little brother to the 800 XL. You can see above it there's what's called a 1064, which is a memory expansion. Again, there's a cassette recorder. I'm not sure why they kept these things for so long. Nobody recorded stuff to tape. Almost everybody did it to the drive. This is an Atari Touch tablet. I actually owned one of these, and I kind of wish I still did, just because they were really nice to use for kids, for art programs and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I lost the cartridge and the Touch tablet. That's an Atari 1027 letter quality printer. Basically, it had a big ball in it, a daisy wheel. The printer itself was good, but the problem was that the power supplies would burn out. And it was hard to get the power supplies, so unfortunately, most of the time you didn't use the printer. The dot matrix or the plotter was a lot better. This is the 1450 XLD I was telling you about. As you can see, it's got 2 disk drives built in. I don't know if this one ever actually saw the light of day or if it was just a prototype, but you could do a bunch of stuff. This is actually an expansion module. I think they had a CPM module for it and a bunch of other stuff. That is a 3.5-inch drive. These are the later models of Ataris, the 65 and 130 XE class. Again, there's the tape recorder that nobody really ever used. Actually, there's 2 of them sitting there. And then there's the 3.5-inch floppy, which I'd love to get my hands on. Those are pretty nice. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at some other stuff here. Again, we're looking at the XLD. Okay, these were promo buttons that were made by Atari and a bunch of other people. Atari was real big on buttons and badges and that kind of stuff, so there's a bunch of them in there. I saw an Amiga one in there too, for this CD-TV. You can see just all the promo stuff that they made. There was a ton of it. Go through here. River Raid badge. I think I had a Dragster one. I can't remember, to be honest with you, but I know I had a couple of those. There's a bunch of Activision badges there that you can see. What you get them for is, if you got like certain scores, or I know in Dragster's case you had to get like under 6 seconds, I believe, to get the patch. Okay, so here are some Mattel cartridges. Excuse me, some Mattel handheld games. I had that football cartridge, or excuse me, that football game right there, but mine was white. We used to call it calculator football because of the way the lines were set up. So, you know, I played that thing probably till it broke. Unfortunately, you know, you can't get those anymore. They're really hard to find. Over here are some, looks like some prototype discs for the PlayStation. Wow, lot of them there. This is a silicon wafer for the Atari Jaguar, a run that they did. Um, Basically, what they do is they print all these CPUs onto a round silicon wafer, and then they cut it up, and that's how they make the computer chips for the Jaguar. So, and they do this with actually all PCs, not or all computers, not just the Jaguar. So this one was presented to Atari as an award. Okay, this is some 7800 box work and some manuals, original ideas and stuff, labels. And here's some of the old books and stuff like that. Some prototype boards. Here are some more prototypes and development boards that they were making. This, believe it or not, is the prototype for the Lynx. The handheld that the Atari had made. And you can see there's a couple different ones in there. Ideas they were trying that they eventually squished down into, the Lynx handheld that Atari made. Bunch of video game magazines here. Again, there's some Nintendo powers in there. I'm surprised they're in such good shape because I know when we were little, we would read these things cover to cover and then give them to our friends and switch them and stuff. So by the time you get them back, they were all beat up and pages were missing and all kinds of stuff. Here's some Pac-Man stuff. There's the bag for the Cosmos machine we were looking at earlier. That was that holographic system. Some more, that's Miss Pac-Man stuff. Some stickers. Stickers were big in the 80s too, so there were lots of stickers of Pac-Man and stuff. Donkey Kong was big too, so there was a lot of Donkey Kong paraphernalia along with the Pac-Man stuff. This is the Intellivision. I actually owned one of these for a while. I kind of wish I would have kept it. I ended up selling it because I just didn't use it as much as I would have liked to. The thing that I remember most about this was actually the commercial. There was a commercial with George Plimpton where he would compare, Atari games with the Intellivision games, and they were a lot better, but the controls that they used were just terrible. You can see here, it's kind of like the 5200. It's got that big number system, and this one was even worse in the sense that it had a disc that you had to move around to move the directions, and it just never controlled really well. The buttons were on the side too, which was a pain, and they were hard to press. So overall, the controller I think killed the Intellivision more than anything else. We're going through here. Here's some more Intellivisions. This is the voice module right there that you can see. You could play games like B-17 Bomber that would actually talk to you, which were really neat. There's a knockoff by Radio Shack. You'll see some too by Sears. I know they had, a bunch of them too. Okay, moving on. We're looking here at the Intellivision 2. That was a later revision of the Intellivision. Right next to it, you can kind of see it right here, is the system changer. Lets you run 2600 games from the Intellivision. Coleco had one of those too. A lot of people had Atari 2600 games. They wanted to keep playing them, but new systems were coming out, so they would build these things. This is actually the Intellivision keyboard and music synthesizer. These were add-ons that you could get for the Intellivision. Um, I don't know anybody who had these, out in the wild. Really, I've only seen them through collector shows and stuff like this. Right here, what you see is the first homebrew Fortress for the Intellivision. You know, a homebrew is basically a game that somebody develops at home and then they burn cartridges of it and sell it. Fortress was the first one. So we're looking at some more Intellivision stuff. There's a PC to Intellivision cable, so you can load games and do development from your PC. They make those for the Atari also. I actually have one of those. Okay, so we're walking to the next table here. And the next thing we're going to come up on is a Japanese system called the Playmate. I don't know much about this system except that it gave you the opportunity to play video games or watch movies. It's a pretty interesting looking thing. It would be neat to see it work, but I have no idea how it works or even if it would work with a NTSC TV here. I know they run NTSC in Japan, but I believe it's a little bit different. This, believe it or not, is a 5200 hotel system. Same as that one before, except it played 5200 games. You would just turn that dial to get the ones you wanted. This is a demo kiosk. Basically, you would put the cartridges in those slots right there, and then based off the buttons you pushed there, you could play different games. You can see there's 3 different columns, and then you would just press the button and it would move through them. A couple different controllers here. My favorite was sort of the, you'll see it coming up here, there's a little red one here. Wicco made one very similar to that one, called the, I believe it was called the Command. But that one right there that I'm pointing at was probably my favorite of all of them. The original Atari CX40 sticks were great too, and I like them also. Between those two, those were pretty much the ones that I bought. A lot of people had like the flight stick ones, but they were just really kind of hard to work with. You can see they're actually getting some stuff out here. Okay, so if you were in high school, middle school, elementary school during the 80s, you saw one of these, which is a Koala Pad. It was a touch tablet just like that one I showed you before, but those were everywhere. I mean, literally, you couldn't go to school without seeing one. Bunch of old Atari books, a couple cartridge boxes. I actually had that Atari Basic book. I think I still do, actually. This is a portable of the 65 XE. To give you an idea, that thing probably weighs about 10 pounds. Definitely not portable by our standards today, but in the past, if you could carry that thing around and use it, it was definitely the way to go, and it was, very exciting to be able to do that. Okay, later on, I don't know why Atari did this, but they came up with these pastel buttons. You can see them there on the XEGS, and I think that's a 130 or a 65 XE right there. I don't know why they switched to those awful pastel buttons, but it was just one more example of stuff Atari was doing that really just messed up the formula. A lot of people that bought those thought they were ugly. But they still played games, so, it wasn't like it didn't work or anything. It was just really obnoxious. Excuse me. This is the Virtual Boy from Nintendo, a 3D system. I remember hearing complaints about, it was kind of hard to use and stuff like that. But personally, I've never used one, so I don't know how well it worked or not. But it didn't sell really well. This is a Game Boy kiosk. And there's a Game Boy Advance kiosk too. Okay, during the 80s, robots were big. and there were lots of systems for robots. And you could some of them were programmable either by computer or by special little keypads and stuff. And they ranged in price probably anywhere from 30-40 bucks up to almost 1,000 for some of them. Probably the most famous one is this one coming up here, the Hero one. I remember seeing this one on all kinds of shows during the 80s and stuff. Next is a Star Voyager model. That model, I believe, was used for this picture right here for Star Voyager. But, in the past, they didn't just superimpose computer graphics onto, a picture for something. They just made the model. So, this is an iPod that's been deconstructed, so you can see what it looks like. And this on the left is an N64. On the right appears to be a Game Boy. Excuse me. Okay, this is a PlayStation that's been torn apart. This looks like an older PlayStation. There's the hard drive. That's the the CPU and the main board. On the left is like the optical area, the optical drive, and some of the other guts that's in the system. Another Intellivision keyboard we talked about. There's a couple games there too that are pretty rare. Drafts, which I believe is darts. I'm not positive though. Burger Time. Wow, there's an Intellivision that's still wrapped in the plastic. Another Intellivision 2 with River Raid, which is pretty rare. Another wrapped Intellivision. Okay, we're going on to the next table here. Oh, there's a ad for Kool-Aid Man and another one for Masters of the Universe. This was actually one of my favorite games to play for the Intellivision. It wasn't that the game was all that good. Basically, you'd fly a little car, shoot stuff, try to get rid of Skeletor. Then you would land at Castle Grayskull, and you could fight Skeletor there, which was kind of neat. Okay, there's the Super Video Arcade. It's an Intellivision that was rebranded basically by Sears. They did that with the Atari too. It was a popular thing. Sears would not let you sell regular stuff at their stores unless you rebranded it with the Sears title. This is a display for Mattel Soccer, that little handheld game up there. That was an Intellivision computer. These are handheld games. You can see right there's a Mattel football. That's the one I had right there, that white one. They had a bunch of games that you could play via handheld. It was really popular during the 80s. They even had a few that were kind of weird. Computer Gin, you can see. Up at the top left, you can see there's one for a horoscope computer. Red light, green light. There's a bunch of them. There's a diet tracker. It's amazing some of the stuff that they built handhelds for. There's head-to-head football, soccer, and hockey. There's another slew of football and baseball games up there. I actually had that game. Those are the tabletop arcades of Pac-Man and Frogger, Galaxian. There were a bunch of these. I had most of them. Again, over the years, I just lost them or threw them away, unfortunately. Had I known what I know now, I would have kept them all. Another Q*bert doll. Okay, again, you're seeing more handheld systems. It's amazing how many of these things they built over the years, especially during the early 80s. That one is Pac-Man 2. I actually had that game. It was really nothing like Pac-Man. But, they sold it as Pac-Man. It was really just kind of a cheap rip-off. There's a Defender one. That's my wife's favorite game. Poker game. There's some of the more rarer ones. I think that's a Tiger Miner 2049er there. Those are extremely rare. Of course, you can see Pac-Man and some of the other ones too. I believe they made more of these in Japan than in the United States, but I'm not positive on that one. There's one called Microvision. This one actually had like little inserts and different stuff that you could attach to it to play different games. There were little cartridges that you would put on it, and then also, like I said, those overlays would tell you how to play the game or what the buttons were for. There's some of them right there. There's the links. You saw the prototype before, how big it was. That's what it was deconstructed to. And you can see that red one there was actually a promotion by Marlboro. If you smoked enough cigarettes and got enough points, they gave you a video game. They don't really do that too much anymore, especially with the anti-smoking laws, where you can't advertise like that too much anymore, but that's where it is. There's another one. There's a white links, a couple white links. That's a his and hers links, believe it or not. They're kind of a weird blue and not pink, but like putty color. Gold Game Boy Advanced. My cousin Devin would like this. This is a special Pikachu version. There's a Nomad up there. And the Game Gear. I actually have a Game Gear. It's a lot of fun to play. Pretty decent handhelds around that time that came out, all by Atari and Sega and everybody else. You can see there, they weren't small by any stretch of the word, but they were very playable and very useful. A set of remote control joysticks for the Atari 2600. These cases, they didn't really know how to store cartridges back then. So, they would give you these little books, or you could buy these little books, and they would, you could put them on your bookshelf. You can see there was another cabinet. That's an original video pinball by Atari. This was before they made a cartridge-based system, so you would just buy this one game and you could play it. Right next to it is a video music. You could play different types of music on it, I believe, by manipulating the buttons and stuff. Okay, so we're going on to the next section here. And these are the ST series of computers. That's an original Warlords picture. Atari was known for the art that they put on their cartridges. Probably the most famous is the Buzz Aldrin astronaut picture that's on Breakout. And, there's some other stuff here too. So these are the ST line of computers. That's the 520, I believe, ST. I have to admit, I don't know much about the 16-bit Atari systems, other than they use the Motorola processor. But other than that, unfortunately, I don't know too much about them. That is a, I believe it's a CD system or a video recording system. Pitfall 2 is a very good game if you've never played it. You can see there, just like now, they used to have video game competitions. You would play for score, and if you won, you got everything from video games to money to, in some extreme cases, very, very neat artifacts like the Sword Quest stuff. If you don't know about the Sword Quest competitions, they're very interesting to read about. Do a Google search online for Sword Quest, and you'll definitely run into all the stuff that was those. More in television stuff. This, believe it or not, is a coin-operated Vectrex computer. Um, Vectrex was a vector-based system. We're going to come back here. There's a kiosk for one. This is the inside. As you can see, it's very simple as far as the electronics go. You know, most of that stuff, honestly, even today, you could probably buy at Radio Shack. It was just a matter of how they put it together. You know, obviously, except for that CRT there, which, you know, even today, you can actually fix some of these, you know, if the common parts blow on them. And there are a lot of people who actually do that. You know, they buy these systems broken and then they fix them. So it's very, very neat that they can do that, you know, 30, 40 years later. This is a later rev. You can see they actually have like their own printed circuit board now. There's a heatsink in there. The stuff gets a little bit more complicated in that model. Okay, this is the Adventure Vision. This was a little cartridge-based system that you could play. Very rare. I've never seen one before then. The Omni, again, this is something I've never actually seen before today. But very interesting. It's amazing, you know, how many people had different ideas about video games. That one, for example, used 8 tracks, which I thought was kind of interesting. It wasn't just for crappy music, they played games on them too. Bunch of handhelds, a couple multi-game handhelds. Again, here we are. Some of them were 3D. They had built the LEDs in such a, or excuse me, the LCD panels in such a way that they were on top of each other, and it looked like 3D. It looked like you were driving into them. There's a lot of Pac-Man games. That one right there, I believe, was popular in Japan, and then they made that one in the United States. Lots of handhelds. Simon, anybody who played Simon? There's a Master Merlin. I had the red version of this game. It was very neat. You could play all kinds of different games on it, from memory to a sort of lock game where you had to hit buttons to get certain patterns. Atari's version of the Simon, the Touch. Just a bunch of games here. A lot of Japanese handhelds. Handhelds were very popular in Japan during the 70s and 80s. The Crazy Pyramid one, I have no idea what that was for. But it looked really neat. Okay, so there's some Super Nintendo stuff. Let's see what else we're looking at here. Sega CD. This, believe it or not, was a bike that you could purchase and hook up to, I believe it was the Super Nintendo, and then there was a game that you could play where you could ride the bike and it would react with the game. Very expensive. Didn't sell well, obviously, because of the cost. But yeah, they made it. You could actually exercise on your computer games. So we're going through here, and there's another Sega. There's the, I think that's the old SBS SMS, you know, the Sega Master System. Super Nintendo. If you were in college in the 90s, or, you know, if you were anything below 30, you probably had one of these things. If you were probably above 30, you had one of these things. Everybody had a Super Nintendo at some point. The games were good. They were fairly cheap. It was a lot of fun to play. There's a test cartridge for the Super Nintendo. This looks like a Famicom box. In other words, another one of those multi-cartridge boxes that you could play games on. Usually those were demo units. This is an original Nintendo. There's Rob the Robot. They used that for a game called Gyromite, where you had to move little stuff to beat the levels. That's a newer Nintendo. This one had problems with the cartridge slots and stuff, the infamous, dirty slots. This one was a top loader, which was a lot easier to use, and it was a lot easier to clean too if you needed to clean it out. Of course, everybody remembers blowing on cartridges to get them to work. You didn't have to do that really with this top loader model, but that front one you did. This is a Famicom, which is the Japanese version of the Nintendo. It actually had stuff that ours didn't, like the little disc drive thing there, or cartridge, slot on the front. You could also put them at the top. As you can see, they're completely different than what we had, and I'm surprised that it never really came over here. They really reworked the plastic and stuff. This is an Apple II Plus. This was actually one of the first computers I worked on. When I learned how to work on computers. I think these things went from anywhere from 16 to 48K, depending on how many slots you filled up with memory and stuff. And those two floppy drives, I believe, were options. You couldn't buy them, as part of the system. Yeah, one of the first systems that came out, for the Apple, after the Apple I, obviously. This is a later one, signed by Woz. I believe that's an Apple II GS. I'm not positive. But it definitely does look like an Apple II G Plus, or excuse me, yeah, the Apple II GS, excuse me, that was made later. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That's actually an Apple IIc. I just caught the little model designation up in the top right-hand corner. They made the 2C in that older model, like the 2 Plus, but then years later they came back and made it, in that smaller form factor. These are Commodore Amigas. Very famous during the late 80s, early 90s. Were used by a lot of graphics and video companies because they could make very nice rendered graphics for television and stuff like that. The video toaster didn't go in this particular model, and it went into the 4000, but this was the same line of computers. They were way ahead of their time. Unfortunately, they were also manufactured by Commodore, and Commodore was almost as bad at marketing as Atari. In fact, at some point they both had Jack Tramiel in them, and we all know what he does to companies. So that right there is an Amiga 500. In the back, that's how you connected it to the television. It actually had a monitor output by default, and then you would slap on that RF converter, and that's how you got it to work with the TV. It was actually better to use it with the monitor because you got the more crisp picture than the TV, but people were still using TVs for their computers, so they gave you an option there, which was kind of nice. That right there is I believe a Commodore 128. Yep. This was the last iteration of the Commodore 64 series. Believe it or not, Commodore 64 was the biggest selling computer in history by one manufacturer, which I still find amazing today. There were over 25 million Commodore 64s or 64 series made, and there you see a 64C. That right there is actually an SX64, which was the portable version of the Commodore 64. I've never seen one of those out in the wild, but very interesting. That's the 1541 drive there, another Commodore. Very, very popular computer, especially not only in the United States but in Europe. There's a VIC-20 and a Commodore Super Pet. These were earlier systems that were made by Commodore. Okay, there's a Texas Instruments TI-99-4A. I always wanted one of these systems because they were kind of weird. I still want to buy one if I can find one. It had a really strange Pac-Man clone. I think it was called Munchers, Micro Munchers maybe. But there was nothing really fabulous about this system itself. It's just it had some really weird games that you really couldn't play anywhere else. And it had that really strange keyboard. Okay, this is the Atom. This is the computer module that was for the ColecoVision, excuse me. I actually think it was a separate system, or I don't know for sure, but I think you could get it as an attachment too. My friend had one of these systems. It was really kind of strange. You could write basic programs and then save it to cassette tape. As I said before, it was incredibly slow. I'm not really sure why they were so sold on trying to make video games, computers, but that was one of the things they did. That steering wheel right there was for Turbo, so you could play Turbo on the ColecoVision. Turbo was very popular when this came out, so everybody wanted one of these things. This is the Aquarius, another Intellivision type computer system. And again, there's another computer keyboard. So now we're going to walk back to the end of the Videogame History Museum here, and look at the last couple tables here. I hope you've enjoyed this tour. I'm sorry if I made any mistakes. Believe it or not, I'm doing this all from memory. So occasionally I mess stuff up. So I apologize. If you do want to look at more of this stuff, just go online. There's tons of stuff that you can do to research. That looks like a laser disc. That's an old laser disc player. Very high quality output, but they were very expensive, so they didn't catch on, compared to VHS or Beta at the time. Oh, my friend John would love this map. This is a map to Star Control 2. We never had this map because we lost it. It would have greatly aided beating that game. I finally did beat that game, but it took years. Some Jaguar stuff. I apologize for my finger in the corner. Looks like a Jaguar test kit there, and then there's a Jaguar with the CD attachment. If you've ever watched Angry Video Game Nerd, he has a whole episode devoted to that CD controller. And here are some Nintendo 64s. One is Jungle Green, the other one's gold. They were special, makes. I can't remember exactly why they were special, or why they made them special, but on the right is a Sega Saturn. On the left is a 3DO. I actually own the Saturn. It's an okay system. I actually like the Dreamcast a lot better, which came out shortly after. But it's not a bad thing to play. The 3DO, the problem with it was it had CD graphics. It was really an innovator, but the problem was the games were incredibly boring, and they just didn't utilize the hardware well enough. On top of that, there were two manufacturers, and there were slight differences between 3DO systems, so you weren't guaranteed. Stuff was about 90 to 95% compatible, but there were times. This is a PS1. Also another PS1. That one is actually a testing PS1, I think. That's the one that I had, and pretty much everybody else, had. There's the Dreamcast there in the white. Fortunately, I went past it. Those are Samba Amigo controllers. I actually have a Japanese version that has taiko drums too, which was kind of neat. I'll have to see if I can find those. There's the Dreamcast again. Very, very good system. Fortunately, it was at the end of Sega's console making career. That is a test unit right there that they used to make Dreamcast games. Right next to it is a... Oh, this is a Mountain Dew Xbox 360. Or excuse me, Xbox system, not the 360 system. Um, very cool system. Above that is a yellow PS2. Mountain Dew gave that away as a prize, I believe. So, okay, that's the end of the Video Game History Museum. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for some of the other videos I'm making. Thanks.